Hi David, thanks for meeting with us today.
You're welcome.
Could you tell me what your role is with the Care Leavers Association?
Okay, I don't have a role with the Care Leavers Association, but when I joined Parliament in 1997, another new MP named Hilton Dawson from Lancaster, who was a social worker, set up a new parliamentary group for members of the House of Commons and members of the House of Lords to learn more about the situation for children in care. And it was his desire that this would be a group where young people themselves could come to the meetings and meet with politicians and tell them direct what their problems are. And so he set this group up. And because of my own background as a lawyer, when I used to be quite active in children's care proceedings, I was very interested in that. So I joined his group and I was a member of it for 10 years. And then he ran at the general election in 2005, and somebody needed to step up and take the group, otherwise it would have folded. And I said I was the group, and so I became the chair of the group. And I've continued his ethos that young people all around the country who are in care, and young adults in care, and even some older adults who were in care a long time ago, all come to the meeting, as do professionals like social workers and people who work in the various charities that are of interest, like Barnardo's and NSPCC, Fostering Association, all of those groups meeting. And then the politicians are there and listen to what other people have got to say before then debating what that means for the law and the policy in this country. And then we go off to see the ministers and lobby them about how the law should change. And I think we've been quite effective at that. But recently I was made a minister myself in another department, ending climate change. So I can't kind of be a member of the government and lobby the government. So I've had to stand down as the chair of the group. And I'm just back to being a member of the group. And another MP's taken over from me. Her name is Helen Southworth, and she's an MP in Warrington.
Thank you. Statistically, the outcome for children who've been in care are poor. What changes do you think need to be to improve these outcomes?
Wow, it's a big issue. To me, the first thing would be to support parents right at the beginning of their children's lives so that things don't go wrong and there's no need to take children away from parents. Now that's kind of a big challenge and one we're a long way from achieving yet. But I recently convened a conference in Staffordshire where we looked at that very subject about what we need to do to get to there. In the meantime, obviously what we've got to do is, when children are in care, is to improve the services they get while they're in care. So we know that lots of changes from one children's home to another, from one foster care to another, disrupts education, disrupts being able to make and keep friends, and often is bad for children's health, particularly their mental health. So we need to minimise the number of moves. We know that some schools are unwilling to have children in their school who are in care, and we know that some of the other children cruelly single out children who are in care, and they're subject to bullying. So we need to kind of stamp out those problems as well. But we need to improve the quality of foster caring and improve the quality of the social work in children's residential homes in order to make sure that the standards are as good as possible. But in my view, in the kind of those early years of deciding care or not, and if there is care, whether it's temporary or not, it's very much for me about working with the parents to try to see if we can keep families together. If it definitely isn't the case, then adoption becomes the option that is the way to give a new stability to children's lives. But we shouldn't be surprised if children have gone through all those kind of experiences with parents, something goes wrong around being with their parents, in care, moving between care places, possibility of going back home or not, social workers discussing their lives with other people. We shouldn't be surprised that takes a big toll on the children's mental and emotional development and causes them difficulties the children haven't experienced, and so it will make it difficult for them to succeed in their studies and then in their jobs later on in life. And unfortunately, too many youngsters in that situation end up in later life. They're homeless, or they're people who are involved in crime and end up in prison, or they're involved with using drugs and alcohol, or get into the same business as people in the sex trade. These are all terrible, terrible outcomes that we should all, every one of us, be determined to avert if at all possible, which is why I started with the big thing, which is we've got to improve services for parents and their children in this case.
Okay. Martin Nary, head of Barnardo's, is calling for more babies to be taken at birth and placed for adoption. What are your views on these?
My initial reaction was, that's terrible. I do know Martin Neri, and he is a very committed person, so I think I need to read his entire speech and understand his arguing a little bit better. I think that's a very wrong attitude to take in terms of the top solution, which is to support parents and their children so that there isn't a need for care. I think what he's saying is that if it's clear that action is needed, we need to be decisive in taking the action and not let things drag. Now, there is a danger in what's called drift in care, that's for sure. But at the beginning, if I wanted decisiveness, it would be to let the resources flow to support parents and their children more effectively right at the beginning, so that we didn't need to be talking about these kind of decisions. So I think possibly he and I are slightly on different sides of our approach to this, but I believe that kind of shorthand description of what he said might be slightly a disservice to his overall views.
Is enough being done to support families to stay together as a unit?
No, not in our society, but I wouldn't like that to be turned into, well, it must be the government's fault. I mean, clearly there are a lot of social pressures that are not to do with whether the government's a Labour one, a Conservative one, or some other political complexion. Our social structures are the responsibility of all of us, and I just think with all the pressures in modern life, with the pressure to buy a house and borrow lots of money and spend lots of money, is kind of causing parents to be pulled here, there and everywhere in an intolerable way, and they don't sometimes have the time to stop and think how valuable they are as the first carers, the first protectors, the first educators of their children. And I don't think it's a fault thing. I don't think we should kind of criticise people or stigmatise people. I think it's about helping everyone to do the right thing. Now, that might sound a little bit naive, but I honestly think that if we can reshaped the services, we could deliver the kind of help through people's own parents and own families more than through government agents and social workers, with the state's role being to make sure the messages are based on kind of proper evidence. So this is the right way to communicate with very young children. These things really are valuable, playing with children, read to children, singing to children, whereas some people think that's kind of soppy in this day and age, but it's actually a vital part of a child's development. And I think we've got to kind of stand shoulder to shoulder with parents to help them to do the right thing. But then resources are really important. If there are people living below the poverty line, then it's the government's responsibility to do something to stop that happening. So there is action, but politicians should take in terms of stamping out poverty, making sure people who want to be in work have got work, making sure that when parents are in work and the mum or even the dad wants time off for caring responsibilities, it's no problem to have that time off. All of those things, those are politicians' responsibilities, and I'd like to see us do a lot more on those things than we do at the present.